Margaret Hayes had led a quiet life. Willow Creek, a suburb, for nearly 20 years. At 43 years old, she had become accustomed to her rhythm's neighborhood, the joggers in the morning passing her porch, the distant bark of dogs, the familiar rumble of delivery vans whizzing by the cul-de-sac. Life had found some steady state, maybe too steady, since her divorce 5 years earlier. She ran her own business as a tucked-away freelance graphic designer occupied in her upstairs office, observing glowing screens while sipping lukewarm coffee. She told herself she didn't miss the excitement she once longed for. But deep down, she felt the quiet ache of days blending into one another. Her son, Daniel, was away at his Boston college, and despite their frequent exchanges, the house still felt too silent when she set two plates on the table out of habit, only to push one back into the cabinet. On a gray Tuesday afternoon, the sound of tires crunching over the gravel driveway dragged her away from her thoughts. She anticipated the standard middle-aged delivery guy who had been dropping off her for a number of years. A man who never wore mirrored sunglasses and barely spoke more here than a sign. But when he wasn't there when she opened the door, a boy stood there. She is not actually a boy, corrected herself, but young, much younger than she expected. Early 20s, maybe 19 at most. He had short, dark hair, dampened by the outside mist of the rain, a baseball cap that has been reversed, and uniform jacket in brown that appeared to be one size too large for him. His eyes caught her immediate attention. Sharp, bright, and strangely familiar, though she couldn't explain why. "Hayes's package?" he asked, his voice light but steady. "Me, that's me," Margaret said, signing the tablet. He stood firm. Her hands brushed against his accidentally, and she experienced an odd jolt. Not exactly attraction, but something startling, as though the touch carried an unrecollected memory. The boy smiled politely, handed her the box, and turned to leave. But before he reached the driveway, he glanced back at. His gaze remained fixed on her home, once more second longer than it should have. Margaret was frozen outside the door, wondering why his look unsettled her so deeply. Over the next week, the deliveries kept coming. Margaret directed more than she needed. The kitchen, books, gadgets, even a pair of boots she knew she probably would return to see if the young driver would show up again. He always have. Each time he arrived, she noticed little details. The way when he extended his hand, they slightly shook. The tablet. The way his eyes scanned the. If she left, family photos would be in her hallway. The door opened too long. The way his smile seemed both eager and nervous. One afternoon, after setting the box inside, Margaret finally asked, "You're new, right? I don't think I've seen you on this route before." He hesitated, then said, "Yeah, I started a couple weeks ago. Just filling in for another driver." "What's your name?" she asked. He responded, "Ethan." And again that flicker of recognition tugged at her. The name struck a chord, but she couldn't figure out why. Margaret nodded politely, but after he left, she sitting at her kitchen table, staring at without opening the package. "Ethan." She said it aloud, whispering it. Why does it sound like a reminiscence of her past? Days later, the heavier rain returned, this time drumming against the windows. In a steady rhythm, Margaret had just finished a video call with a client when the doorbell went off. She rushed downstairs, expecting another package. But when she opened the door, Ethan stood there, sans box. He was drenched, the cap dripping with water from his hat. He quickly said, "Sorry, I'm not here for delivery. My van broke down at the end of your street. I don't have my phone on me, and you are the only house with the lights on. Perhaps I can call the depot from here?" Margaret blinked, taken aback, but then stepped back. "Of course, come in." He He cautiously entered, taking off his cap and running a hand through his wet hair. For the first time, she saw his face fully, without shadows or distractions.
And in.
She felt her stomach drop in that instant, his cheekbones, eyes, and even the smallest scar on the left side of his brow. It all clicked into place. He looked almost exactly like her boyfriend from high school, Carter. Michael had been her first love, the boy who drove her to prom, the one who promised to write to her prior to his departure for the Navy and never did. Michael, who she later discovered had passed away in a car accident many years ago. Margaret looked at Ethan, her heart beating, racing. He wasn't just vaguely familiar. When he was 17, he was nearly identical to Michael. She handed him her phone with a trembling hand. She answered while he called, sank into a chair, trying to steady herself.
It couldn't be.
The similarity was uncanny, yes, but people resembled others constantly. Still, as Ethan, she thanked her and ended the call, unable to shake the sensation that the past had just walked into her kitchen. Are you in? Okay, ma'am. He noticed her and asked her. A pale face, she quickly lied, saying, I'm fine. After that, unable to restrain herself, she blurted out, Do you know anyone named Michael Carter? Ethan froze. His eyes, before he masked, slightly widened. It with a shrug. Why are you asking? Margaret swallowed hard. You just remind me of someone I used to know.
For a
moment, silence hung heavy between them. After that, Ethan spoke slowly. Michael Carter were my parents. She felt the words like a thunderclap. Margaret's chest tightened, and she gripped the edge of the table. His father, Michael Carter, which meant she stared at Ethan, her voice barely audible. But Michael, your father, he's gone. He perished. Ethan nodded, looking
down.
Yes, even before I was born.
My
mom never talked about him much.
Just
stated that he was a decent man who made mistakes. And the fact that he died young. I never even viewed a picture of him. Margaret's eyes welled with tears. She emerged from her chair and proceeded to the previous drawer in her hallway and retrieved a worn-out shoe
box.
Inside, wrapped in tissue, were a handful of photographs she hadn't looked at in years. She pulled out one, a snapshot of her and Michael at a summer fair, his arms slung around her shoulders, both of them laughing.
When
she showed it to Ethan, his face went
pale.
He whispered, That's him. That's my dad. Margaret felt her knees weaken. She had been burying for decades her memories of Michael, telling herself it was just youthful love that ended too
soon.
But standing before her was his son, who is living proof of him. And in that moment, Margaret knew her life was about to change in ways she couldn't have imagined.